Welcome everyone to Deakin Downtown. I'm Professor Emma Covell. I'm the convener of the Science and Society Network, and I would first like to acknowledge the traditional owners, the people of the Kulin Nations, and acknowledge their elders past and present, and acknowledge any Indigenous people here with us today. I am just here to welcome you, to acknowledge our traditional owners, and also to acknowledge the sponsors of the event, the Alfred Deakin Institute for Citizenship and Globalisation, the Science and Society Network, Monash University, and Springer Nature. This is the very first Falling Walls that we've had in Melbourne, Falling Walls Lab, and I'm so excited to hear everyone's brilliant ideas. So I'm going to hand over to our MC today, the celebrated science communicator, Jenny Martin.
Good morning. So, which are the next walls to fall? What a great question that we get to hear answers to today. I hope you're all as excited about this as I am. So, this is Falling Walls Lab Melbourne. I think it's one of about 50 Falling Walls Lab events that's happening around the world. This mic feels like it's going in and out. How about I just talk without a microphone? Yeah. All good? Perfect. So Falling Walls is essentially, in fact I'm going to come over here. Falling Walls is essentially about brilliant people, which is all of you guys, coming and telling us your ideas about how you're going to change the world, how you're going to make the world better, how you're going to come up with a solution to one of the most pressing and challenging and difficult things facing the world today. And there doesn't seem to be any, lack of problems to choose from where I'm sitting from, so I can't wait to hear some good news for a change. So I hope everybody is as excited as I am to hear about what walls these brilliant researchers plan to demolish and how they plan to demolish them. So Falling Walls has been operating since I think about 2011. The Falling Walls organisation itself started 10 years ago, which was 20 years after the Berlin Wall came down. And this morning I suddenly thought I should have brought in my little piece of Berlin Wall that I chipped off myself while the Berlin Wall was still standing. I was there a year after the official wall came down, but I couldn't find it, so never mind. Just imagine I have a lucky charm in my pocket. I'm sure it hasn't got lost in the multiple house moves since then, we hope. But the idea of Falling Walls is about sharing ideas, crossing disciplinary boundaries, coming together to make better solutions. So I really encourage you, as well as sitting there nervously, as I know you all are before you speak, remember that today is also about listening and thinking and sharing and working together. So this is the way it's going to work. We have 15 brilliant speakers. You can pick them by their yellow name badges and the fact that they're all sitting there super pumped about today. They each get 3 minutes and 3 slides to tell us about how they are going to demolish their wall. What's going to happen is, over here Josh is in charge of our very famous timer. This is across all Falling Wall events. Basically there's a countdown from 3 minutes. When we get to this point, I have to make sure I'm hopefully watching and listening carefully, because I'm then meant to stand up, and wherever you guys are at, I am then going to advance the slide for you, even though you're the one holding the slide advancer, to say question time. Now the way Falling Walls works is that there's only 30 seconds for questions. Kind of means that it's not just you guys who are practicing your communication skills today. Anybody who wants to ask a question, you also have to, because there's 30 seconds total for questions and answers. Now I am going to initially...
That's the sound when you finish.
Perfect. Oh, and was there a sound at 10 seconds ago?
There's a clearing of the throat.
Oh, which I just talked over, so clearly it wasn't loud. Keep your ear out for a clearing of the throat when you've got 10 seconds to go. When that noise happens, Josh told me he's going to throw something at you really hard if you're still talking. Isn't that right, Josh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. But just back to question time for a second. The way it's going to work is that I'm going to give preference to these wonderful judges who I'm going to introduce you to in a moment, because if they have any pressing questions, it's really important they get them answered. If by some miracle they don't have any questions, or they are so eloquent and so fast that we still have some 30 seconds left, I will be very happy to open it up to the floor. But I am going to very rudely and discriminatorily give precedence to those guys. These wonderful people here have the incredibly difficult job of working out who our winners are today. So I want to introduce our esteemed jury to you. Maybe you guys can just give a little wave as I mention you. Now, if you look at your program, you've got full bios for these people. I'm not going to do you the disservice of reading out those bios word for word. I think you're all quite capable of doing that. Rest assured they are super smart, bring a wealth of experience and brilliance, and interestingly and really importantly for today, a huge diversity in their expertise, which is wonderful. So I'm just going to give you a brief introduction to each of them. First of all, we have Professor Emma Koval, who you just met. Other than being a very dear high school friend of mine, which I just thought I'd get in there, Em. She's also Professor of Anthropology at the Alfred Deakin Institute for Citizenship and Globalisation at Deakin Uni, hence why we find ourselves at Deakin today. And she's the convener of the Deakin Science and Society Network. And Em is a cultural anthropologist. So as we go through, I want you to think about all the expertise these people bring. So Em is a cultural anthropologist. She was previously a medical doctor because it wasn't enough to just have one really, high-level qualification, and a public health researcher in Indigenous health. So that's Em. Then we have Kath Rowley. Give us a little wave, Kath. Hi, Kath. Kath is Special Advisor on Climate Change at Infrastructure Victoria, and she's worked on environmental policy for a really long time at state and national and international levels, so she knows a heap of stuff that I don't know. I want to talk to her later. And as Executive Director Climate Change in the Victorian Government, she's led some major overhauls in environment protection and climate legislation. So a very different area of expertise. Professor Callum Drummond, away from Callum, thank you. Callum is Deputy Vice-Chancellor Research and Innovation and Vice President at RMIT University, and he's really passionate about the commercialisation of research outcomes, which is clearly a very important part of what we're thinking about today. And Callum came to RMIT University in 2014 from CSIRO, where he had a major role in being the group executive for manufacturing materials and minerals, which was a very large group with a very large budget. Professor Brendan Gleeson, down the end. Welcome, Professor Gleeson. Brendan is Director of the Melbourne Sustainable Society Institute at University of Melbourne, which is where I'm from. He's written and edited a heap of books focusing on urban and social policy, environmental theory and policy, and you've probably heard him. He's regularly in our newspapers, on the radio. He has all sorts of important things to say about the future of our world. All right, where do we have Tim? Dr. Timothy Neal. Welcome, Tim. Tim's a cultural anthropologist and a DECRA Senior Research Fellow also at Deakin. And his research is about bridging the fields of human geography and cultural anthropology. And last time I met Tim, I had the great pleasure of finding out that he was also a child TV star. I think it's really important you all know that. Tim, you're going to give us any, renditions later?
No.
Okay, never mind. Never mind. The final member of our incredible judging panel is Dr. Leonard Hoon. Lovely wave, thank you. Leonard is a data scientist and a senior research fellow at the Applied Artificial Intelligence Institute. And last time I met Leonard, I asked him a bit more about his job because I didn't really understand what that meant. And he told me that his job is to manage customer disappointment. He went on to say that the next part of his job is to turn customers' frowns upside down, which I thought was really classy. Essentially, he leads this really big, amazing multidisciplinary team to turn fundamental research into solutions for clients, doing all sorts of stuff that I definitely don't understand. But the point I want you to take from this is we have this incredible panel of judges. How lucky are we in lowly little Melbourne on the world stage of Falling Walls to have this incredible group of people whose difficult job is to work out which of you guys is going to be today's winner. So the next thing I have to tell you today is what our winners have to look forward to. This could be you. So the top 3 place getters, receivers, I don't know what we want to say, the top 3 of today will all be flown to Canberra to compete in the Australian final, which is very exciting. The winner of the Australian final in Canberra then gets to go to Berlin to compete against Falling Walls participants, Falling Walls Lab participants from the whole world, and you're going to get to hear a little bit more about that shortly. And importantly, anyone who wins the opportunity to participate in the final in Berlin also scores an invitation to the Falling Walls conference. And this is where the world's kind of movers and shakers across science and industry and humanities and policy making all meet and work out how to fix the world's problems, essentially. So I think it sounds like a pretty awesome place to be. And that conference takes place every year on the anniversary of the Berlin Wall coming down, which is the 9th of November. And as I said, this year's the 30th anniversary, so it's going to be a pretty amazing year to be there, given what that meant for the world. Excitingly, that is not all. Here's one I prepared earlier. Today's winner also has the opportunity to undertake a mentorship with the one and only Sarah Phillips, who you're going to get to hear more from shortly. It's going to be this incredible opportunity to develop writing, science writing and editing skills, and I'm very jealous because I want to do that too. I'll talk to you later. All right, that's enough of the kind of housekeeping. You know the judges, you know the score, you know how it's going to work. We're going to start the talk shortly, but I have someone very important to introduce to you first, and that is Dr. Hayley Teasdale, who she's won heaps of stuff. For a start, she was the national runner-up of Fame Lab this year. Fame Lab is one of those great competitions where you get to sing and dance and have costumes, and I really want to find out what you did. I'll have to ask you later. But more importantly today, Hayley represented Australia at Falling Walls Lab in Berlin last year. Her work sounds absolutely amazing. So she recently completed her PhD on proprioception and balance in Parkinson's disease. She's also founded a tech company, which I hope we're going to get to hear a little about. Her work has won a whole heap of accolades, and I'm really delighted to introduce you, Hayley. Come and tell us about your Falling Walls experience. Give these guys the excitement of what's to come. Thanks, Hayley.
Oh, thank you so much. All right, sorry.
Just get that out of your way.
Oh, thanks. Okay, so a very special welcome to especially all of our presenters. I'm sure you're probably sitting there with a big bundle of nerves in your chest, because that tends to happen to me. But if I can give you any advice, it's that that's a really good thing. So the best thing that I ever see is that nervous energy coming out in a really beautiful, exciting way when you're on the stage. So use that. So last year, I had the absolute pleasure of being selected to go to Berlin to participate in the Falling Walls Lab finale. Over there, they call you labsters. You're in the Falling Walls Lab and you're a lab star. And the MC made an error and called everyone lobsters. That's where the lobster joke comes from, right? So, we decided that we preferred lobsters, actually. It just described us better. So your fellow lobsters in Berlin are very special people. 100 lobsters from all over the world who have been selected to come to Berlin for a very special reason. They've had an idea or a breakthrough that's going to change the game. So that could be anything. These lobsters are game changers. They break the mold. They're change makers. You get the point. When I went to Falling Walls Lab, I thought my solution was so universal. My idea is a rehabilitation tool in the shape of a ball that could help train your body to help it better understand where it is in space. It can improve movement accuracy, improve your balance, and importantly, prevent the elderly from devastating falls. So I thought that everyone would be really excited about this. You know, the ageing population is a huge problem in Australia, and we all talk about it being a problem across the world. As I sat in the Falling Walls finale that day, I heard solutions from Africa that would change the amount of smoke that's inhaled as people try to cook with fire in their homes. I heard from young people who had great solutions to tackle climate change, to create new limbs for people in their war-torn home country, or to make the world more accessible for the blind. The winner of the finale last year, he was incredible. So he 3D printed organs based on scans of people that needed complex surgery. And these organs, they felt and they bled just like the real thing. And this allowed surgeons to actually practice their surgery before they got in there for that person that really needed it, and reduced surgical complications to almost zero. Unfathomable, the amount of lives that he's already saved. that's the competition, right? These are some incredible lobsters. So something I didn't know before I went is that Falling Walls Lab, which you're competing for a place at today, is just one tiny part of this huge week. And that Falling Walls conference that you've heard a little about is a part of it. So there's some other parts. There's Falling Walls Engage, which is for programs across the world that help to engage people with science. Some incredible people in those programs that are definitely worth talking to. There's also Falling Walls Venture, where companies that were founded by research can then pitch to investors who are looking for people just like them. So the Falling Walls Conference Day is kind of like a TED Talk event on steroids. The speakers are world-leading scientists and innovators, but it's the audience that gets you. The audience are Nobel Prize winners. They're ambassadors. They're ministers. You can be getting a cup of tea with a fellow lobster and you turn around and there's an investor who's seed-funded some of the world's greatest companies, just at the juice station. It's amazing. Nothing could have ever prepared me for having these people that I'd idolised in science be waiting for me with a beer after one of the sessions, because you're in Germany, right? The week of Falling Walls, there is so much to take in. You do as much as you physically can, but you'll still leave wishing that you talked to more people. So that's why I was thrilled to be invited back this year as alumni. So if you are selected to go through to Germany in this year's national final in Canberra, you'll be joining me for a trip of a lifetime. So I'll be here all day, cheering you all on, and I'll be here if you need any advice. 3 of you will be joining us in Canberra in about 10 days, it's pretty soon, and I'll be a familiar face there too. So good luck. Just know your audience is all here to be inspired, and we can't wait to hear your big ideas. So thank you.
How lucky are we to have Hayley here? Makes it all more real and more tangible, doesn't it? And we're nearly there, guys. I just have one more very important person to introduce to you, and that is Sarah Phillips. Come up, mate. Sarah is the executive editor for the Asia Pacific region of Nature Research Group. I have to remember all that.
I know, I can't remember.
Sarah and I also fell in love with the idea of becoming marine biologists when we were 16, so we go back a fair way, but she's really important now. Sarah's here to represent Spring and Nature, but she's also an award-winning science writer. She's worked for many years for the ABC, for Cosmos magazine, for a whole heap of other places. And as I mentioned, one of the things that you are in the running to win today is to get to work with Sarah, which would be really incredible. So take it away. Tell us about your amazing stuff, please.
There's nothing like being offered as a prize to induce a massive wave of imposter syndrome. I'm like, I'm just a person. yeah, I won some awards, whatever. So I'm up here, I'm from Spring and Nature, and I want to talk to you about science communication, because effectively that's a lot of what we're doing today. It's always seemed to be one of those things that's self-evidently good. You know, if only science could communicate better, everyone would know more about the world would be a better place. But I actually have a controversial thing to say. I think scientists are actually really great communicators. You think about what a scientist does all day. Mrs. Scientist in a lab, Dr. Cabal, she's there doing some work, she does some experiments, tests some theories, and then what does she do at the end? She writes it up. She writes it into a scientific paper and sends it off to Spring and Nature, the world's biggest publisher of scientific publications, and says, I'd like this to be communicated to a broader audience. Science is not complete until it is communicated. And so science publishing, the massive body of literature that we have out there in the world, is in fact a communications project on a grand scale. Yeah, there are some papers that are better than others, but you know, there's some movies that are better than others. There are some novels that are better than others. There's always good communication and bad communication. But the only time that a science paper is a real failure is when it's talking to, if you can't understand it, it's because you're not the target audience. And for science papers, let's face it, that's most of the time. For science paper, it's speaking to a very niche audience of people who already are very across the subject and who just want to learn the new thing that happened last week that they weren't quite in the lab when it happened. So you're usually not the target audience of a science paper. Which brings me back to science communication. So what do science communicators like me, bring to the room? Well, my background, as Jen said, I actually did marine zoology in school, and then wandered off to university and did marine zoology at university, and couldn't choose between writing and science, so I also did an arts degree at the same time. Came out at the end, wandered off and became a science journalist. So what have I been doing for the last 20 years? Basically, I've been defining an audience, thinking about who that audience is, refining the audience, and then thinking, what do they need? What can I give them in what form to give them exactly what they can understand and absorb and take home with them? It's like Dr. Hoon's here, what was it, turning the frown upside down. That's explaining complex data science in a way that Jen can understand. He knew his audience. So really it's about, communication skills are really about understanding your audience. And that's not to say that a scientist can't learn those skills. There are lots of really great science communicators out there. You know, you've got your Brian Coxes who do world tours and, you know, he does, you know, TV shows and all that sort of thing. And I went and saw him. He is an amazing communicator. He is absolutely fantastic. But I've also interviewed hundreds of scientists in my career, and some of them are brilliant at explaining their science in a way that lowly me can understand. And you know what? That's important, because if I can understand it as a journalist, then that means it gets a run in the paper. And if I can explain it to the people who are reading the paper, then they understand it better. It's been shown, there was a study of the 10 years worth of science coverage of the New York Times, and this was done a long time ago. But they found that papers that were covered by the New York Times on average were cited more often than the papers that weren't covered by the New York Times, and in the first year of that paper being released they were cited 72% more times more often. And they actually even managed to control for the fact that maybe it was just an objectively good paper and that's why it was cited more often, because the New York Times distribution went on strike during that period, and the New York Times still did a paper of record, so they sort of still noted what they would have put in the paper, and they just didn't distribute it. So no one was reading the paper, but they had noted which papers they would have covered. And the papers that weren't, in the strike period, the papers that were covered didn't get a bounce. So it is people reading the science in mainstream media are also being exposed to science that they might have otherwise need to cite. I mean, let's face it, scientists are human. They're going to be reading the paper just like everybody else. So, as you're sitting here today and you're about to get up in front of all of us and talk, don't worry, we're lovely people, we've got your back, don't be frightened. Just remember that the skills that you're learning today, even if you don't win, if you don't go to Canberra, you don't go to Berlin, you are developing important skills for your career right here, right now. And that is a brilliant exercise and something that will hold you in good stead for the rest of your career.
Thank you, Sarah. I could not agree with you more.
Funny that.
Funny that. All right, we are nearly there. Let's revel in the excitement of being in a room full of so many brilliant and diverse researchers. I really can't wait. So with our speakers, as with the judges, you have their bios in your booklet, so I'm not going to read them all out to you. All I'm going to do is introduce each speaker by name and tell you which wall they are planning on knocking down. The one other thing I wanted to say before we begin is, hopefully you can see our hashtag is Falling Walls Melb. Let's show the Falling Walls world stage how wonderful Melbourne is. So if you are a social media user, let's get some action happening on Twitter and Instagram, whatever your platform of choice is. I think that would be fantastic. So let the talks begin, and let's immerse ourselves in a world of innovation. 3 minutes is on the clock. Josh, you have the scariest job of all, mate. I wish you luck keeping in charge of the time. If anyone notices that I've forgotten to stand up at 2 minutes 30, feel free to throw something at me. I'm worried about getting too immersed in the talks. I'll do my very best. But our first speaker I'm delighted to introduce is Dr. Tony Mowbray. Where's Tony? Perfect, Tony, welcome. And Tony wants to break the wall between theory and practice. Please welcome Tony. Sorry, pointer. I don't think we need to use microphones. Is everyone happy with the volume? Yeah. If any speaker feels like you know you have a quiet voice, we do have a microphone, but I think probably it's okay without.
Do you know how to go back on this? Back arrow. Thank you.
The back arrow.
Good.
So if you do a Google search of the most used degrees, chances are psychology will come up somewhere in that list. Now, as a university educator for a fully online psychology degree, this is a concern for me. So why is this the case? Well, if we look at the number of students who go on for further training and registration once completing a degree, we find that only about a third of them do. Now, even with this statistic, it seems strange to me that psychology would be considered a useless degree. I mean, you think about your workplaces, how useful is psychology when interacting with your colleagues, your clients and your students? What it actually suggests to me is that there is a theory-practice gap, that we need to better teach students how to apply the theory they learn in the course to real-life outcomes. So how do we bridge this theory-practice gap to show that psychology is actually a very useful degree? And how do we do this not only for our on-campus students, but that ever-increasing cohort of fully online students too? Well, one way is 360-degree video simulation. So in this simulation, you're put in the shoes of a worker as you watch the interactions with your co-workers around you. And as a student, your job is to apply your knowledge of theory of emotions across cultures to these interactions. And then you do this all within a 360-degree, fully immersive workplace environment. So one great thing about actually experiencing a workplace compared to a video workplace simulation like this is the realism and immersion that an actual workplace offers. However, with just a $5 to $10 headset, like the one I have here, you can experience the same 360 video you've just seen, but in virtual reality. So what virtual reality does is it hacks the senses to make you feel like you're present in the environment being shown. So what we can offer is an immersive and realistic experience, whilst also retaining the benefits of this format, such as being cost-effective, time-saving once it's been set up, consistency across multiple experiences, accessibility to most students, both online and on campus, and across multiple devices, and low risk when compared to an actual workplace. So overall, through using 360-degree video virtual reality simulation, we can offer an immersive and realistic experience accessible to all students that breaks down that wall between theory and practice. And let's see if we can change those Google search results. Thank you.
Questions?
What evidence are you drawing on to say that VR experience will increase the number of people registering as psychologists?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there is evidence out there, and a lot of companies are using, so say, for example, Walmart and other companies are using virtual reality now to train their staff and things like that, and they found it quite useful in doing that. So I think there's the evidence out there to suggest that that method is a good method of experiencing like real-life situations.
I gave Tony a couple of extra seconds because I didn't think to tell you we don't want to waste any of that 30 seconds clapping. So that's why I was a little bit relaxed there. So hold your claps until the very end after question time because you lost. Everyone was clapping so hard for you, you lost at least 3 or 4 seconds. So thank you so much, Tony. Well done. Now, hopefully if I go like this, perfect, we get to the next slide. So I would like to welcome Dr. Elena Schneider-Futzschick, who is breaking the wall of cystic fibrosis. Elena, that is for you. Good luck. So remember, no clapping until after questions.
Thank you. Did you know that more than 1 million people in Australia carry a gene for cystic fibrosis? So nationally, that's 1 in 25 Australians. Every 4 days, a baby is born with cystic fibrosis, and most of these babies won't even turn 40 years old. One of these people is my sister's friend. She and her partner recently had a baby that was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, a disease they hadn't even heard of before, and now their whole lives have changed. Cystic fibrosis as a disease has many faces: salty sweats, abnormal stools, coughs, repeated lung infections, and mucus that clogs the lung and leads to lung failure and eventually death. There is no cure for cystic fibrosis, and patients as old as 6 years have to take up to 40 different tablets every day and face hours of physiotherapy just to stay healthy. And here comes the wall. By taking 40 different tablets every day, interactions are very likely to occur between these medications, which affects the concentrations. So if concentrations of a drug get too low, this can result in treatment failure. If concentrations of a drug get too high, this increases side effects and toxicity. To break the wall that stands between patients, the treatments that they so urgently need, and the best quality of life, we have developed a platform that measures the concentrations of these cystic fibrosis drugs in a little plasma samples of 500 microliters in one single assay. Based on the concentrations that we get back, together with the patient's individual profile, like age, gender, co-medications, we work together with clinicians to optimize the treatment based on each individual patient's profile. Our platform is currently being trialed in some cystic fibrosis centres in Australia and in Europe, and we want cystic fibrosis patients to have the best quality of life and help them celebrate birthdays past their 40th. Thank you.
Questions from our judges?
What's the turnaround time for the analysis?
The analysis? So the assay is really quick. So the assay only takes 6 minutes to run. So we usually try to collect like a couple of patient samples, because the analysis takes about half an hour to an hour. And especially if you look into implementing like more co-medications and all that stuff, that will extend the analysis time, of course, as well.
So could it be like a glucose sensor where you analyse
Well,
every
glucose
day
sensor
to
is
see what
very
medication you
quick,
need?
so not as quick as a glucose sensor, but we're hoping for something that maybe if you take the sample in the morning and in the late afternoon or evening, you get the results back.
Does it require a blood test?
Yes,
How much blood?
500 microliters.
Great job on the questioning. You get the pace now, right? It's going to be super quick. You judges, you're onto it. I love it. All right, we are on to speaker 3, who is Dr. Aaron Fox, who is breaking the wall of knee injury in female sport. Over to you. Thank you, Aaron. Yeah, big one. Thank you.
Knee injuries have been a problem in female sport for over 2 decades and continue to be one in current sporting times. And these injuries have significant short and long-term health consequences. The long-held belief for the sex disparity in knee injuries is that females are made differently, that sex-specific aspects of female biology contribute to hazardous movement strategies and elevated injury risk in sport. One thing that we often ignore in the field of sports medicine is that biology isn't the only difference between males and females in team sport. This is a common thread picked up on by the media, and such attention emphasising sport as dangerous for females may actually have a significant impact on female participation in sport. What we actually see at the professional level is there is a substantial gender pay gap, and across the board we see reduced investment in female sport. Further, the relative infancy of female participation and lack of opportunity in the past for females to participate in typically male-dominant sports may introduce a component of reduced sport-specific development in our female athletes. All up, this can lead to reduced access to training facilities. It can also lead to reduced training opportunities in our female athletes and reduced access to medical and athletic development staff. And together, this can all have a flow-on effect to elevating female athletes' risk of serious knee injury. So there's a proof of concept to support these notions. Ballet and contemporary dance are athletic professions that have similar high-risk movement strategies to team sport. But what we see in this profession is a much better balance for opportunity and training age between the genders. Importantly, there is no difference in the number of knee injuries male and female dancers sustain. And this goes to show that when we see equal opportunity in training age and development, that this sex disparity in knee injury rates can simply disappear. Our big idea is to challenge this notion that biology is the sole reason for the sex disparity in knee injury rates, and that perhaps we need to consider rather than ignore these factors in our injury prevention strategies. And once we start doing this, we'll really see a dramatic reduction in knee injuries in female athletes. And what this will allow females to do, women and girls, to continue to play these sports in a safe manner.
Beautiful. Questions?
This is an idea at this point. Have you put this into practice?
Not yet. What we're looking to do to bounce off this idea is to actually start looking at those developmental opportunities and access to medical and athletic staff in female versus male sport, particularly at the community level around that pubertal age where the sex disparity in the injuries really starts to be present.
If anyone couldn't see Aaron's socks from your vantage point, I highly encourage you to check them out later. They're very nice socks, Aaron. All right, our fourth speaker is Fela Bauer. I have to remember to do this. Who is breaking the wall of building for emotion.
Thank you.
Welcome, Bella. Thank you. Take it away.
Picture a time you felt vulnerable. Can you feel your heart speed up, your hands go clammy, and your mind start to race? Perhaps you're in a hospital corridor or an exam hall about to be tested. Now, focus on the building you're in. What if, without your conscious awareness, the design of that space was affecting you? I want to know if the design of buildings changes our emotion, and if so, how we could measure this. To give you some context, there was a transformative moment in the neuroscience community when we discovered that the environment triggered cellular, molecular, and behavioural changes in animals. Altering their housing alone resulted in brain tissue changes, improved performance in learning and memory tasks, and even delayed the onset of brain diseases. We spend 80% of our lives inside buildings, a rate increasing, yet we have no idea how this is affecting our brains. I don't think that's good enough. So I set out using techniques from neuroscience to create a way to objectively measure the impact the design of buildings has on our emotion. So how could we do this? Well, imagine standing in a room surrounded by projector screens. This is a form of virtual reality which we call a cave, enabling us to control your environment. To understand what is happening in your brain, we use a technique called electroencephalography. This is where we place electrodes on your scalp to measure brainwaves. We're also monitoring your body through heart rate and sweat response. This reveals if a change to your environment has been detected without your conscious awareness. To understand what your senses are telling your brain, we break down design into simple elements, such as colour, texture, form and scale. We show you one of these elements in isolation to understand how it is processed. And to ensure this is the result of the design element alone, we control all variables responsible for your body's comfort. The lighting, temperature, humidity, acoustics and air quality, something which has never been done before. My research is developing this technique to understand the invisible impact of buildings, the result of blending neuroscience, engineering and built environment knowledge. Research to inform those who design our workplaces, schools and hospitals, perhaps even a new strategy to tackle rising mental health rates. And a way to reduce your anxiety in the hospital or exam hall, so you're in the best possible emotional state to make important decisions and feel your best.
Questions? Emma?
Is this a Western scientific feng shui?
Interesting question. No, it's putting a bit more rigour and science behind it by actually getting some objective measures. So instead of just asking someone how they feel in a space, it's saying, well, perhaps they might not be able to actually answer that question as to how they feel in that space. Let's get some extra number about that.
Kath?
How important is emotion to outcomes in different formats? You talked about health and education. What's the link?
In healthcare and education settings, I feel people are a little bit more vulnerable. So either developing brains or in healthcare, quite vulnerable because you're in a reduced state. You're not just, you're a bit, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Bella. Josh, I must say, you're doing a very fine job of the timing over there. You haven't missed a beat yet.
Need to do something about that cough though.
Yeah. Why couldn't they have chosen a different sound for the 10 seconds? Anyway, I know that wasn't your choice. That's another Falling Walls.
Very German.
Yeah, very German, that's right. Let's not be offensive to anybody. Elena, our German speaker. Okay, I'm delighted to invite Ashwin Singh to come and take the stage. Thank you, Ashwin. Ashwin is breaking the wall of global vagrancy. That is for you. And it is everyone. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Now, imagine we go back 8 years to the day of 11th of September 2011. We see the news that the Twin Towers in America, they collided because of this brutal terror attack in America, which was the biggest in its history. Now, have we realized that vagrancy is an issue impacting the world, and it's a bigger threat than terrorism? And with vagrancy, in Australia, we've got 1 in 200 people who are vagrant, who are homeless, 1 in 100 people in New Zealand who are homeless, they've got no home. And the reason for that is the main reasons are financial reasons and accommodation reasons. But despite all of this, we still enjoy our lives. We go on travel, tourism, leisure activities, and people, like last year, they spent nearly $263 billion on adventure travel. That's like a record. And in New Zealand itself, they spent $39.1 billion. That was over $107 million per day. And Australia was $41.3 billion. That was $113 million a day, which is a pretty big amount. So Vagari Adventures, what it does is it provides these adventure activities, starting with Australia and New Zealand, but we give back 30% of the profits towards the welfare, consulting, and the support for these homeless people. So, have you got any questions?
I've got a comment.
Yeah.
You're going to be, if you go to Berlin, right, in front of a room of ministers and whatnot, I would try to refrain from the comparison between vagrancy and terrorism.
So how long has the company been in existence, and how much revenue has gone back to support vagrancy?
We've been running for about 3 years now. We've started our MIT activator, and we've supported a bit of vagrancy because we haven't had much time to invest quite a fair bit.
What does a bit mean in dollar terms?
We've invested about, say, $500. It's not much.
Thank you.
How important is adventure tourism in addressing the problems of vagrancy relative to other factors? What's the evidence that will help make a difference for the people you're working with?
Yeah, because through these when they do adventure activities, they also contribute towards the research for their accommodation and occupation options, because we have provided occupation for artists to work on this.
We are making record time here, people. I'm very impressed with how good everyone is at sticking to time. So I'm delighted to welcome speaker 6, who is Dr. Laszlo Fraser, who is breaking the wall of solar power. That is for you. Welcome, Laszlo.
Thank you. I'm Laszlo Fraser from the Center of Excellence in Exciton Science at Monash University. The world's poorest people can't afford to purchase the energy they need. So, for example, they pick up dung off the ground and burn it to cook their food. In addition to being inconvenient, this causes lung infections in children, so it's best avoided. We want to take old, dirty energy technologies and replace them with new, clean energy technologies. Currently, the cheapest source of energy available is solar cells. But all solar cells have a limitation. They are partially transparent. Normally, this transparency isn't the color you can see with your eye, but here's an example where you can. If the transparency of the solar cell is too large, most of the light from the sun will pass through the solar cell and will not be converted to power we can use. If the transparency of the solar cell is too small, then the voltage of the solar cell will be too low, and you will not get much useful power out. There is a particular transparency where the performance of the solar cell is at an optimum. This optimum is our wall. We want to go beyond the optimum. To do that, we need to take the red light that passes through the solar cell and convert it to yellow light the solar cell can use. Now, it's very easy to take green light like this and turn it into yellow light like this, because green light has more energy than yellow light. But red light has less energy than yellow light, so we need to increase its energy. My proof of concept material takes the red light and fuses it together to make yellow light, which will increase the performance of solar cells. This will increase access to energy for the 1.1 billion people who live in energy poverty, while saving energy users $1 billion per year and preventing the release of carbon into the atmosphere. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, what's the cost comparison between solar and hydro, nuclear, and gas right now?
What's the cost comparison right now? So about 2 years ago, for the first time, solar energy won an auction between all these different options. The price of solar is falling rapidly. Meanwhile, nuclear is getting more expensive. Currently, solar is cheaper than wind or any fossil fuel in places that are sunny. Personally, I think that's really important because the people who have energy poverty mostly live in very sunny places.
There's a massive industry and research sector worldwide looking at solar power and efficiency of technology. How singular, how innovative is what you're doing? There must be a lot of people working on this.
Yes, great question. I'll answer that afterwards since my time's up.
Oh, I like it. I'm impressed at your restraint. Perfect. Thank you so much. Oh, it's already happened. You've done that for me. Thank you. Okay, now I am delighted to welcome Dr. Sharman Tantani, who is breaking the walls of swallowing difficulties in children. Thank you. It's all yours. Yep, just thanks. Thank you. This is Chloe. Chloe is a 6-year-old girl who does well in school and has lots of friends. However, Chloe has difficulty swallowing certain foods, such as carrot and stick, due to their tough consistencies. You see, Chloe was born with a condition called esophageal atresia, which is often associated with tracheoesophageal fistula. To put simply, her esophagus or swallowing tube had a gap, as well as an abnormal communication between the swallowing and the breathing tube. As you can imagine, she would have had difficulty swallowing her own saliva at birth, resulting in choking episodes, and thus needed life-saving surgery in the first days of life to join the two ends of the swallowing tube together and to divide the abnormal communication between the swallowing and the breathing tubes. And for every 2,600 newborns, there's one just like Chloe. And despite successful surgery, 85% go on to have swallowing difficulties into adulthood. It frustrates me that we do not yet have a way to be able to identify who these patients will be, and therefore we cannot prevent possible choking episodes and subsequent death. Now, this technology might provide us with some answers. This is high-resolution impedance manometry, which is currently utilized in adults and in some children with swallowing problems, but it has not yet been systematically applied to children with esophageal atresia. And this is where my research comes in. In the world's largest study of its kind, I am utilizing this technology to map out the swallowing pressures of children with esophageal atresia. This technology allows me to map the pressures into a color contour map here that's easy to interpret,
where red shows high pressures and blue shows low pressures. And this is what a normal swallow looks like, and the pressure is generated through as the patient swallows. I've now completed 96 such studies in 58 children with esophageal atresia, and I found that 38% of them have no pressures when they swallow, 36% have some pressures, and 9% have high pressures. My study is still ongoing, and I aim to correlate this to the symptoms of swallowing problems that the patients have. Ultimately, this will allow me to have a strategy to identify the patients who are at high risk for choking so that we can follow them up closely, intervene before choking happens, and save lives, improving the care of children with esophageal atresia across the world. Thank you.
Questions?
So how many children in Australia have had esophageal atresia that's been fixed?
Yeah, so the incidence is 1 in 2,600. In Victoria alone, we get about 20 to 25 per year that require repair, and the current mortality rate is less than 10%, so we're getting survivors much better than before, and therefore we're now focusing on the long-term outcomes for them.
So, what's the invention here? Is it the pressure sensor?
It's the application into this group of patients who have never been studied and not well understood.
Okay, so it's the application.
That's right.
Thank you. Okay, let's move away from science for a moment, I believe. Let's welcome Julia Mastantoni, who is going to be breaking the wall of feminism. Thank you, Julia. That's for you.
Just a small trigger warning, this presentation focuses heavily on sexual victimization. So if anybody doesn't feel like they can listen to this, just maybe take a moment to go outside. I'll be done in 3 minutes. Everyone is good? Hi. So what I would like to do today is something that is definitely not popular. I would like to tell you about the shortcomings of Me Too, one of the biggest byproducts of contemporary feminism. What I would like to argue is that we actually need to move away from feminism and embrace something that I like to call humanism. Can I have hands up from those of you who know who Abita Ronell is? Nobody? She's a feminist. She has been accused of sexual harassment. She's been found guilty. She lost her job. However, her feminist fellows have immediately raised to defend her. She has always been such a huge proponent of gender equality. Her accuser is clearly making it up. Now this rings a bell. She made it up. She repented, so now she's crying rape. She's clearly exaggerating. What has happened in this case is that feminism has simply replicated patriarchal dynamics, and this is not what should happen. Unfortunately, this is not the only episode that has happened. Anyone who knows actress Asia Argento, she has been accused of raping a male underage boy. Now, she's not been found guilty. Things are quite unclear. However, male heterosexual social media users have immediately started commenting, say that, oh, if only that had been me, what a jolly victimization. And feminists are not raised to support the boy. They are kept focusing on bigger scandals, Hollywood scandals, where the victim was female, young, and pretty. This is something that shouldn't happen. This is clearly promoting the double standard. So what can we do? Me Too has been important. It's been huge, more than important. But now we need to acknowledge that feminism has had its shortcomings. We have acknowledged it for patriarchy, and now we need to do the same. We need to move away from it, and so to speak, we need to clean our walls. We need to decide to not have labels anymore. Once we have done this, then we can create new forms of speech, new forms of art, new forms of literature, new movies, new songs, everything, literally build a new culture that keeps reiterating that there are no labels. They are just human beings as such, and they deserve respect and defend as such. So what I would like to do here today is to state that we need to come together and write together a new feminist manifesto. Does anybody, a new humanist manifesto. Does anybody have any questions about this? No?
To what extent does moving away from labels just hide the discrimination that those labels are all about?
Well, there is lots of research, mostly from the social media field, that says that those people involved break needs, which are basically things like she made it up, she's crying very because she's offensive. They are usually people who really believe in male supremacy. So, unfortunately, there is no research to police different female people who do this kind of things. It would be interesting to investigate. Thank you for these.
Please welcome to Arkagosh, who is breaking the wall of digital construction. Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. So today we will look at the story of concrete. So it's the most widely used material in the world. Globally, around 25 gigatons of concrete are produced annually, and it's also the cheapest construction material. The Australian concreting sector has a revenue generation of 9 billion Australian dollars, and around 12,900 industries are based on concreting activities. But there are lots and lots of problems in the concreting activity, starting from its production, transportation, placing, curing, and even after it's constructed. Some of the major issues affecting concrete are rework, extra labor, wastage of water, time delays, and also there is bleeding, early age cracking, water staining, and thermal cracking. Thermal cracking is one of the most important issues which is affecting the concreting sector. So to maintain the quality of concrete, there are a lot of tests and retests which are done in the construction sector. But since they are done manually and traditionally, the curing temperature, they are not actual representative of the elements. There is delayed in the results. It actually takes 28 days for the curing results to come. And as you can understand, for mega projects like buildings, dams, it's a lot of time delay and lot of testing and retesting extra costs. So how do we solve it? We are using some digital sensors, and we have developed a framework called the Digital Concrete Quality Control. The sensors, as cheap as less than $100, the entire kit actually costs less than $100. So at every stage, starting from its production, we are monitoring using the moisture sensor, the temperature and humidity to optimize the curing process. We are using the piezo element for monitoring of cracks and early crack detection. So our activity timeline is as follows, and right now we are in the third stage of sensor coding and integration. This is the type of how we are proposing to install the sensors. And this is the final dashboard. This is you could say, the outcome of the entire system, where you can just sit on your desktop and monitor the different concrete parameters without even going to the site. You can monitor it digitally in the form of a dashboard, the critical alerts, where the crack has occurred, or whether your concrete member is ready for erection, what is the strength attained, the real time it's attained there. So the key benefits is around 30% of cost savings and better transparency and stakeholder management. Thank you.
Questions? Lennon.
Cost of operationalization after or during construction for tech infrastructure sensor costs.
Yeah,
to
it's
maintain it?
the sensor, only the sensor cost is around $100, and the background and the endware cost is around $500 to $600. So till now we have spent around $700 for the project, and we are will be right now in the lab stage. So it will be also tested in field to test the practicality of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Josh did try to work out how to get rid of that sound, but apparently we can't. Never mind. Okay, I'd now like to welcome Chunyan Lee, who is breaking the wall of drugs' adverse side effects.
How do you
Thank you, Chun.
This
is that to go forward. If you need to go. Yep. You need to go back. That one. Exactly. Thank you. Welcome.
Do you know that raw medicine can make you sick? Do you know that in the United States, more than 2 million adverse drug reactions occur in the hospitalized patients? Oh, sorry.
Big one.
Oh, big. Sorry. In the United States, more than 2 million adverse drug reactions occur. About more than 2 million adverse drug reactions occur in the hospitalized patients that leads to more than 100,000 deaths each year. From 1976 to 2010, 34 drugs were withdrawn from the United States due to adverse drug reactions. And most of the researchers have carried out studies to predict adverse drug reactions. However, most of them only focus mainly on classifications of adverse drug reactions, and the techniques they use tend to be label intensive, expensive, and time consuming. So the aim of my project is to break the wall of drug side effects. So we use autoencoder to predict molecular structures and each drug's properties. Where the input we use immune-narrated smileys, and it encodes the encoders is able to identify the relationship between the smileys and its molecular properties, and the decoder then reconstructs the molecular structure into recognizable structure. So these are the results from our studies, where it's able to produce predicted molecular structures and log P values, where it shows the solubility of drugs in our body, the distribution, absorptions, and metabolisms of drugs in our body. However, it doesn't give interpretable side effects of the drugs. So we further improve our model to hybrid model, where it consists of both image-based model and language-based model, where language-based model is able to extract the drug properties from the molecular structures and translate it into a natural language sentence. So the output of the model will be predicted side effects of the drugs translated in a language forms. So the unique of our model is that we use teacher forcing method as well as long shortened memories. So it will further improve our models to a reliable model. Thanks.
Questions? Leonard.
This is my area. Alright, sensitivity tests around your neural networks. How do you ascertain your evaluation protocol for something like this?
The sensitivity.
Yeah, so for instance, you make assumptions when you generate a model based on the training data you provided, right? So for your evaluation, how do you ascertain whether or not this model is generalizable to most people, or it's a representative sample of how a human body will react to the drug?
Okay, so
it was a long question.
Talk later.
Take 5 seconds if you want it. It was a long question.
Oh, we can talk later.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry, Leonard, you lose points for a long question. Don't go, we need you. Don't go anywhere, please. Okay, now it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Sharman Islam, who is breaking the wall of unintelligent energy systems. Thank you so much, Sharman.
So this one is for going forward and this one.
Exactly.
Hello everyone. Every day when you go back home, what's the first thing you do? You turn on the lights, turn on heaters, air conditioners depending on the weather. You use some hot water to clean your hands, and then you cook meal. What is one common thing among all those activities? You use energy. Why do we need our energy systems to be intelligent? Let's see. This is you turning on different appliances at your house. At some point, let's say, your neighbor does the same thing, and then his neighbor, and let's say hundreds of houses in the suburb. If they also do the same thing at the same time, at certain point of time, the electricity distribution network will say, I can't carry more electricity, I can't pass them more, I'm out of my capacity, and then bang, will go an outage. Something similar to that happened in February 2017 in South Australia, where more than 90,000 people were out of power for 45 minutes. It was a hot, humid summer evening, so the rooftop solar PV could not generate enough, but they were using the air cons very heavily. And experts say that this kind of scenario happens when the electricity distribution network does not have enough intelligent devices that can adapt their strategies based on how end users are going to change their behavior regarding energy consumption. So how to break this wall of unintelligent energy systems?
I have designed an optimum demand management algorithm that takes into account how much solar generation you'll have in the next day, how customers were using energy beforehand, and what are the preferences, and what will be the weather forecast. Based on this, the optimization algorithm will ask simple questions to the customers, that is, when you want to turn on an appliance and by what time you need the appliance to finish its operation. And then the algorithm will assign that appliance to all possible time instants within the given time frame and see what is the best time to operate that appliance so that you don't have a very high peak demand, and you can also get the operation done within the given time frame. I have tested this algorithm for a typical Victorian household for summer conditions, and you can see that the peak demand is less here, whereas the demand is higher during other off-peak periods where you have plenty of solar generation which you can use. Thank you. Any questions?
So lots of work happening in the space of demand management. What's different about what you're doing?
So the things that are happening with the demand management, often they use some kind of messages to the customers that you should turn off your appliance or you should turn off your loads, but it is not happening in the automated manner. So if we are relying on the customer to work on the messages, based on the messages, they may or may not choose to do that. That's why this one is automated, that's the difference.
How was that for perfect timing? Very impressive, thank you. Okay, now we get to welcome Kim Ensel, who is breaking the wall of women's professional sport. How good is
That
it? We've
too.
got 2 talks focusing on women's sport.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you very much. So, sport is an important part of our everyday life and our identity. But sport is and always has been male-dominated. Women are underrepresented in leadership, coaching, media, and also participation. But what we find is that when we start a successful women's professional sport league, we actually see an increase in the representation of women in these areas. For example, we saw a 75% increase in women's Australian rules football participation within 3 years of the associated league, the AFLW, starting. But the problem is that women's sport leagues often fail and they face a wall to become successful and sustainable. And this is because we often base women's leagues off men's professional sport leagues. So we need to think differently. And here are the 3 guiding principles to make sure that we can think differently and break the wall of women's professional sport. We need to think about different indicators of success. So for men's leagues, this is about profit. And for women's leagues, in the short term, the more important indicators of success are about participation, health outcomes, enjoyment, and potentially even social change. And these may lead to longer profit outcomes for these women's leagues. There also need to be different priorities. So for women's leagues, they may not have a larger pool of resources in the early stages, but this is okay. There needs to be a prioritization of what is important, and this needs to be communicated with all of the stakeholders to understand why these things have been prioritized, such as broadcasting, professional salaries, access to high quality coaching, and also staff as well. Also, we need different growth opportunities. So for women in sport who have tried the hardest and toiled within the grassroots foundation of a sport, they need the opportunity to be able to forge a career like the men have within the sports sphere. And by doing this and being able to create a pathway so that this can happen, we will be able to see not only more women involved in sport, but also a different and more diverse range of voices within the male-dominated sports space. And lastly, most importantly, we need men's professional sport leagues to champion women's professional sport with these 3 key principles in mind. And only with these key principles in mind and men's professional sport leagues thinking about them this way will we really be able to demolish the wall. Thank you.
Questions?
So do we need a national organisation to take these forward?
No, I don't think so. I think it can be up to individual men's sport organisations, or it can be women's sport organisations as well, but they need to have their own, I guess, understanding of what makes them different to men's sport organisations and leagues themselves.
Another quick one?
So why shouldn't men's sports leagues prioritize health and participation and other social impacts?
So that's a good question. Do I have time to answer that?
10 seconds.
They should, but at the moment they are quite profit-centric, and those things are secondary when they need to be primary. Thank you.
Nicely done, Kim. Thank you very much. Okay, we are nearing the end already. I can't believe it's gone so quickly. Lucky number 13.
It
How
is
good
lucky
is
number
that?
13.
That is for you. Please join me in welcoming Son Vivian, who is breaking the wall of binary gender. Thank you, Son. Big
Thank
one.
you, everybody. So, arbitrary, unnecessary and out-of-date binaries exist all around us. I'm here to talk about two, online and in real life, and gender. What can we learn from their intersections? Core to this, for me, is speaking and listening across difference. And this is what I've been doing in applied creative workshop practice with gender diverse folk and their care providers. We start exploring with similarities. So we have a common love of language here today, I think. I'm a grammar geek and went to extreme causes and had asterisk tattooed on my arm. This was at the same time that I was able to access South Australian law reform that allowed me to change my birth certificate to non-binary, to access a low dose of testosterone without being sterilised, and to get an X in my passport. So perhaps these are points of difference between us. I'm maybe thinking that most of you go with an M or an F. Despite these differences, law reform hasn't caused the sky to fall, and I'm here to argue a few more commonalities between the way we do digitally mediated post-gender identity in our non-binary world. So I'm going to skim through these really quickly. Ontologically, gender and sexuality diversity exists. Online acronyms proliferate. If you're excited by people who are into ideas, you may be sapiosexual. Scientifically, there's at least 40 gene, hormone and anatomy variations that underpin intersexuality. We may or may not know that these actually exist within our bodies. Culturally, let's celebrate the fact that white fellas are not the centre of the world, and that there are two-spirit folk, sister girls and brother boys, and many others. Linguistically, we use singular they pronouns in everyday speech and have done so since Shakespeare. Performatively, this is the important one. Digital traces reveal different aspects of ourselves to multiple audiences, something we continue to angst and argue about in online spaces. But this is not new. The entanglement of identity on and offline just highlights the way that we code switch. And so this is what I've been doing in workshop practice with gender diverse people and their service providers and educators. We, through creative workshop practice, play with ways that we do identity, multiplicity and transition. One of our exercises is getting photo montages from different defining moments of our lives, and we've all got them. Cute teen, surly kid, first love, first job, first PhD, through inviting policy makers, educators, medical and social service providers to play with self-curation. We can
finish your
live
questions.
in a non-binary world.
Sorry, Son, questions?
No worries.
Do you think this has to be in person?
I think that being in your body and playing in practice with the idea of being more than oneself, it changes something in your head and in your belief system.
All right, now we get to welcome Brian Haskins to the stage, who is breaking the wall of fear for out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. Thank you, Brian.
That one?
That one. Big one.
Oh, the big one?
Yeah. All good. Thank you, Brian.
Okay. Every year in Australia, there's 30,000 out-of-hospital cardiac arrests, and at present, only 10% survive. When someone has a cardiac arrest, their heart stops pumping blood. Without bystander CPR, people have a 10% less chance every minute of surviving. But with bystander CPR, that chance doubles. But CPR is just buying time till we can get a defibrillator there, because we need a defibrillator to change the heart to a normal perfusing rhythm. Early defibrillation last year in Victoria had a success rate of 64%. Unfortunately, this diagram here represents the chain of survival as it stands at present. Only 50% of out-of-hospital cardiac arrests will receive bystander CPR, and only 12% will receive defibrillation. Why? Because there's a wall of fear. People are afraid of providing bystander CPR because they think it's difficult. It's not. We've changed it. There is no mouth to mouth. You just have to push hard and fast to the chest to the tune of Baby Shark. Defibrillation is easy. People think defibrillation is dangerous. It's not. It's simple. You push the button, turn on the machine, and follow the instructions. No one's got hurt by public defibrillation. We need to change this chain of survival to this chain of survival, where every out-of-hospital cardiac arrest gets both bystander CPR and defibrillation. If we do, we'll save hundreds more lives. So how do we do this? Well, we're using our paramedic students in Monash to train people. In 2018, we ran micro CPR training events as part of Restart a Heart Day, but we only trained 100 people. This year, we expanded it. We developed a 40-minute CPR program that we offered to local sports clubs, and we've ran 10 of those events. But again, we've only trained 300 people. To make an impact, we have to train more. So in 2020, we're developing a new model, which will see a full-time bystander CPR coordinator organise and facilitate training events in schools, sports clubs, and in the community. It will allow our paramedic students to run bystander CPR training as part of their community placement programme. We're getting sponsored for a camper van to be used for transporting the students and creating a hub. This will make a model that can be used by other universities around the world to expand the bystander CPR training and make an impact and save more lives.
Questions?
So a lot of people do first aid training through the workplace. So just relative numbers comparison?
So the training people do at the workplace tends to be required of them, and it tends to be at least a 3-hour training program. We're doing a shorter, very quick 40-minute training program, which doesn't give them certificates, but gives them the confidence to do bystander CPR and defibrillation.
I would have just thought the volume would be much higher in the first aid training than the numbers you put here. So just looking at, is it a significant increase in the number of people that are trained in CPR?
5 seconds.
We just need to train a lot more people. There's not enough people stepping forward, even with the ones that are trained. So we just need to train everyone to do this so it becomes normal.
Okay, thank you.
Terrific. My goodness, Jayshree, who's been sitting here patiently the whole time. It's finally your turn. We had a discussion at the start about whether it was best to be first or last. Either way, you finally made it. Please join me in welcoming Jayshree Dumbre, who is breaking the wall of air pollution.
One out of 8 people die because of air pollution. It is this invisible wall which has been shown here. Only the green areas are the areas where people can have good quality air. So you can see the problem is widespread. This issue has been studied well, and it has been concluded that transportation sector is one of the major contributors to this problem. Well, there are various regulations and policies that are being imposed on vehicle manufacturers so that the fuel efficiencies can be improved and the the carbon dioxide emissions can be reduced. All these efforts finally lead to light weighing of a vehicle. Now, the light weighing of a vehicle can be achieved if a low density material can be used. In this case, it can be aluminium. However, current aluminium alloys have these limitations. They have low strength and toughness. Their crashworthiness is not really good, and they have low processing ability. My solution to this problem is coffee beans. And this is not a joke, because being a material scientist, I know that an exceptional material performance needs an exceptional microstructure. And that's why, to break the wall of air pollution, we have developed a unique microstructure which contains coffee beans but at nanoscale. So how many of these particles we need? We actually need. The beauty of this structure is that the crystal structure inside the particle and the area surrounding the particle is almost similar with a small amount of coherency strength. It is this strength that results into exceptional strengthening. Now the big question, how did we achieve it? Our miracle element is scandium. We have added scandium into an automotive grade of aluminium alloy, which you can see that the scandium takes the corner positions in the unit cell of an aluminium, and that leaves the original structure unaffected. In our lab, we have also developed a special heat treatment process that improves and optimizes this kind of microstructure. So far, we have received 30% improvement in strength, that too without the loss of ductility and corrosion resistance. We believe that the future cars, the future aeroplanes, and even the future spacecrafts can be more lighter and fuel efficient, so that the wall of air pollution can be broken to some extent. Thank you.
Questions?
Is it still recyclable at end of life?
Yes, so for aluminium that's the best quality because we can recycle 100% of it as against to steel, because right now a lot of vehicles have been manufactured with steel and recyclability is extremely poor. So in this case that's a very positive point.
What's the toxicity of scandium?
No, scandium is not toxic, but it is a little bit expensive. That's the only drawback of having the scandium. It's not toxic.
All right. Imagine if we had to listen to 100 talks in a day. That would be quite demanding, I think. But please join me. In fact, we have all of our speakers stand up, just so we can thank all of you again for your effort and your wonderful ideas. I'm going to put this down so I can clap properly. Thank you. Thank you for coming and sharing your wonderful ideas. I certainly don't envy our judges, who are all beavering away there feverishly. How about we give our judges a clap while they continue to work hard. Another clap to Mr. Josh, timekeeper extraordinaire. So what needs to happen now is that there needs to be a bit of time for finalising of decisions.
Okay, thank you everybody. Just quickly, I'm Josh from Spirit of Nature. Most of you would have had communications with me already. I'm sorry I haven't had a chance to say hello. It was a bit manic this morning to get everything lined up and ready. And in line with that, I'd just like to quickly thank Elsha and Tao, who are both here, put their hands up, helping the organisation. There's a lot of work that went in behind the scenes, and I'm really thrilled with how it all went today. And also a big thank you to all the judges for coming along and giving up their precious time. It's fantastic to have all of your expertise. We've got a really nice blend of backgrounds, and we had one judge pull out. It was Sarah Pink, so that's pretty good considering. Thank you to Sarah Phillips as well, my colleague from Spring of Nature, and also to Hayley and Nancy as well, from Nancy Pritchard from the Academy of Science, sitting up there with Hayley. And those guys are running the Canberra finals, which happening on the 3rd of September, I think that's right, yeah. So, now over to the enviable task of reading out the winners. I thought I'd quickly just run through the way the judging system works, so you're aware. There are 3 main sections in the scoring: breakthrough factor, relevance and impact, and structure and performance. The weighting of these is 50% to breakthrough, and you can see the various criterion under each of those sections there. Then 30% to relevance and impact, which is all to do with audience, and then 20% basically on the structure of the presentation and your performance, and you all performed wonderfully, I must say. So without further ado, I'm sure you're all keen to hear the actual results. We had quite an exciting last minute development in the judging, where we had a tie for 3rd place, and we had some high level discussions with Hayley and Nancy, and we're thrilled to announce that there's another position open for a 4th person to attend the final in Canberra. So I'm actually announcing 4 winners to fly to Canberra, not 3. So the odds are pretty improved significantly. So without further ado, the first of the third place winners was Brian Haskins for fear of out-of-hospital cardiac arrest.
Thank you very much.
And do you want to stay up? Maybe just stay up. The second third place winner was Arkagosh for digital construction.
Congratulations.
And in second place we had Isabella Boa. Recording for a motion. And in first place, I was hoping I wouldn't have to pronounce this name, was Elena Schneider
Wojcik.
for cystic fibrosis.
Thank you.
We've also got certificates for everyone else who participated, and thank you again guys so much for coming along. And I know it wasn't easy for most of you to get up and talk about your research, so you should all give yourselves a big pat on the back. And yeah, hopefully we're going to run this again next year, and there's more opportunities in the future for all you guys.
And we expect you guys to win in Canberra, at least one of you.
Home ground advantage. And thank you all for coming along.
We just, if can all the judges and speakers, if you could come up to the front for a group photograph, that would be great. Thank you all. Have a great day.